Welcome to End Times 101. This is week 8. My name is Brent Seawel, and I'm teaching from Poplar Bluff, Missouri. We've been looking at the end times, calling it, for me, it comes together pretty easy after not having come together. As I was growing up, I was taught pre-tribulational rapture, and a little bit later I was taught amillennial teaching, and I tried to make sense of either one, but I always had trouble because they tended to conflict when I would try to figure out which was the coming in power and glory, for instance, on the premillennial side, on the pre-tribulational rapture versus post-tribulational rapture. I had some trouble. What kind of trouble I had, which I believe that most people do have, if they're honest with themselves, have trouble deciding when the scripture would be talking about the rapture, which would be 7 years prior to the coming in power and glory. I always had trouble separating how do I know which one's which when I'm reading the scripture. Came to the conclusion after several years of looking at it, some probably 30, 40 years ago, in the late 70s, I was challenged to look at it for myself and don't let your preconceived notions determine what you thought. Anyway, I came to a different conclusion. That being, I believe in a pre-millennial coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, and that it's just one event. It is the one event that includes both the rapture and the resurrection. I believe that the biblical term is actually resurrection, and it happens to be that at the resurrection, the ones that are left, and we call that the rapture. Okay, the ones that are left that have not died but they're believers, they get changed into resurrected bodies. But the big event, biblically speaking, is the resurrection as the significant point of the day when the Lord comes to redeem us and to rescue us and to defeat death. Last week we went into for the first time into Revelation in some kind of depth, and Revelation happens to be built in a series of pictures, a series of events, that if you feel like that Revelation has a starting place and things keep happening until Jesus comes in chapter 19, I believe you'll miss the point. Revelation actually has a different sequence of events and different perspectives, so that you'll see a perspective and things leading up to a certain point, and then it'll change views and things lead up to a certain point. And in some of those events, you'll see Jesus coming, and Jesus coming, and Jesus coming. And so in that sense, I think any honest person who would look at Revelation would see that Revelation is not a sequential start to finish book of a sequence of events that ultimately ends in Jesus coming, but it is several perspectives of a look at Jesus coming. Along with that, those perspectives fit into a pattern that Jesus left us in Matthew 24. That Matthew 24 and Olivet Discourse passage, which is recorded in Mark and Luke as well, those three passages, when you combine them together, you have an overall look at the last 7 years before Jesus comes. Especially Matthew 24 is probably the most detailed. Matthew 25 goes on and talks about when Jesus comes as a bridegroom, and they're waiting for him, and they've got their oil, either they're ready with oil in their lamps or they're not. There is the servants who are left while the master goes away, him having given them 5 and 2 and 1 talent, and they're responsible to invest that until he returns. And when he returns, he rewards those who are faithful. So, and then the final thing in Matthew 25 is when Jesus comes in his power and glory, he sits on his throne, and he'll set the nations in front of him, and he divides the sheep from the goats. All that takes place in Matthew 25 as his coming, his reward of the servants, and his dealing with the nations and separating them into everlasting fire, or step into the presence of the Lord. that Matthew 24 has what we have built, 7 or 8 pillars. And I've had a drawing that has gone with this, and so I've just I leave it up there. But that Matthew 24 has these sequence of events, which, when we go into Revelation tonight, you'll see that we are tending to be at this point right here. But that sequence of events is repeated from Daniel. Okay, I'm going to draw a line here. Here's the beginning event. Actually, Jesus says there's birth pangs before this thing takes place, but there's a beginning event of birth pangs, earthquakes, rumors of war. Tribulation is the first sign. Offenses is the second sign. The third is the kingdom of heaven. The gospel will be preached in all nations. And he says, and then shall the end come. In other words, at this point, he says, then shall the end come, and yet the end really is not immediately there, but it is when he comes in power and glory. And this whole road, this whole path goes toward the day of the Lord, when he comes and when there's judgment and when he deals with rewards the faithful and whatever. And so in this path, this abomination is this third step. He says, and then shall the end come, for when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, let him who reads understand. This is what was spoken of by Daniel the prophet. He says, then shall the end come. So I'm going to point an arrow right here at this one, right here. Then shall the end come. Okay, in other words, the things will start accelerating right then. Although time does not accelerate, just events accelerate. The abomination of desolation is spoken of in 2 Thessalonians. It's when this one who exalts himself, sees himself in the temple, saying he himself is God. So this takes place in Jerusalem. That is the same thing that Matthew 24 is talking about. Much of this says it's in Jerusalem. For when this thing happens, run from Jerusalem, for then there shall be great tribulation, such as there never have been since the beginning of time until now. And so this tribulation that has started right here is different than this great tribulation. It says, then the end shall come. I'll read these last pillars because we want to get into Revelation tonight. Abomination of desolation, great tribulation. People will have to leave Jerusalem area. There'll be false messiahs and false prophets with their own signs and wonders. Then there's heavenly signs in the sun, moon, and stars before Jesus himself comes in power and glory. For he says, for immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will turn to blood, the stars of heaven will be shaken, and for as lightning shines from the east and goes to the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. So this end sequence that starts here highlights from this point to this point, the end. We looked at Daniel, and we came to the conclusion that in the middle of the 70th week of Daniel is the abomination of desolation. Okay? 70th week is 7 years. 7 years from here to here. In the middle of the 70th week is the abomination of desolation. That means this is a 3.5-year period. This is a 3.5-year period. This 3.5-year period is going to be repeated a lot tonight in Revelation. We're up to Revelation 10. We have covered Revelation 6, 7, 8, and 9. 6 is the first 6 seals. Jesus, the Lamb, in heaven has opened up the scroll. He's worthy to open up the scroll. He opens up the scroll, peeling back a layer at a time, if you will, breaking open a seal. You have the 4 horsemen, the first 4 seals. You have then 2 more seals that are that are broken, and all that takes place in Revelation 6. Then Revelation 7 begins the seventh seal, and that seventh seal covers 4 chapters. The seventh seal contains 7 trumpets, and the 7 trumpets are from they're broken up into 2 groups, 1 through 4, and 5, 6, and 7. 1 through 4 we covered last week. In this 6th seal, which has, or 7th seal, which has 7 trumpets, 1 through 4 very much deals with a third of the earth, a third of mankind, a third of the sea, a third of the trees, a third of the rivers and lakes, a third of the seas, a third of mankind, all lost in those 6, in the first 4 seals. The 5th seal doesn't mention anything about a third, but the 6th seal goes back and starts talking about a third again of destruction. But that 6th seal ended, the 6th seal ended at the wrath of God. The 7th seal is opened, and we covered last week that at the end of the 6th seal, which says the day of his wrath has come. That's in chapter 6, verse 17. It says, the great day of his wrath has come. And I gave you a preliminary hint that the 6th seal and the 7th seal overlap, because at the end of the 7th seal, which has 7 trumpets, the end of the 7th seal, it says the day of his wrath has come also. Okay, it actually says it in verse 11:18. So, my point being, leading up to all this, you have 6 seals. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 6th one ends the day of his wrath. Ends at the day of his wrath. The 7th seal also ends at the day of his wrath. Same time. Apparently the 7th seal overlaps, at least for sure, the 6th seal, if not more. And the 7th seal, the 7th trumpet, is right here. There are 7 trumpets in the 7 seals. 7 trumpets. I'll just draw trumpets this way. Trumpet, trumpet, trumpet. That's supposed to be a triangle bugle end, okay? But I'm getting my bugles backwards or something. All right. 7th trumpet. 7th. So, here we are at the 7th trumpet. Actually, we're at the 7th seal, 7th trumpet. Look at verse, chapter 10. Let's just read chapter 10 of Revelation. You want to turn there? You know, I want to cover one other thing before I go to that. This 3.5 years. I want to show you how prominent this 3.5 years, because this 3.5 years is going to come very prominent in this 7th trumpet era. I have a handout that looks like this. References to the 3.5 years. I'm going to give you some. Daniel, Revelation. Within Revelation, I'm going to give you a couple others that really you wouldn't think at first. Luke and James. But I'm going to put those in the context of Revelation. All right. Daniel 7:25 talks about the Antichrist. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for time, times, and half a time. That is a cryptic way of saying, especially when you figure this out by other passages, by the way, a time, a times, which is usually understood to be two, a one, a two, and a half a time. Okay, that's a cryptic way of saying of time, times, times, and half a time. Year, year one, year two, or year 2 and 3, and then another half a year. So here's a time, times, and half a time that the people, the saints in particular, are given into the hand of the Antichrist. Daniel 9:27. He, this same character, the Antichrist, shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. That's considered to be a week of years, a 7. But in the middle of the week, the middle of this 7 years, which is the happens to be 3.5 years, in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abominations he shall be one who makes desolate. That's as far as I'll go, but that's where we picked up the middle of the week, this point right here, in the middle of the week. That particular verse is the one that points to us that he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abomination shall be one who makes desolate. There'll be an Antichrist who has made himself clear back here, but he takes his role, somehow he's made his appearance on this, but he makes his role evident right here, who he is. Daniel 12, verse 7 says this, Then I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters, when he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever, that it shall be for time and times and half a time, and when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. It's another reference to say that the time of the holy people and their troublesome time will be in particular over a 3.5 year period. There is that 3.5 year period, still in Daniel. We've seen it in Daniel 7 now, Daniel 9 now, and Daniel 12. And that verse, that passage in 12 goes on. I'm going to pick up at verse 11. And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, that's right here, and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. Okay, we got a little conflict here because Jewish year is 1,200. If you just go straight months, it's 3.5 years. 30 days to a month, 12 months to a year is 360 days per year. That happens to work out to 1,260 days. Daniel is saying that period is going to be 1,290 days, okay? A little bit longer than 3.5 years. Daniel says that. Revelation is going to go to this 1,260. Daniel says 1,290. And then he says, you're blessed if you come to 1,335 days, okay? Okay, all of that is certainly 3.5 years Jewish time. That could be 3.5 years Jewish time, because did you know that every couple of, I believe it's within a 19-year period, the Jewish calendar actually has about 7 leap years, which they call a leap. They add a leap month in those years, and so there's an extra 13th month in 7 out of those 19 years. So it's possible that could be referring to 3.5 years, one having the extra month, okay? And so that's got an explanation for it. I don't have a great explanation for 1335 yet. That's 45 extra days, more than this 1,290. Regardless, if you're splitting hairs, there is a difference between 1,260 days and 1,290 days, and 1,335 days. I'll leave it to you to get to that challenge, but that's what Daniel is saying that these 1290 days is the time from the time the abomination is set up, there shall be in this end time 1290 days. John, in the passage we're going to go to tonight in Revelation, is going to be talking about 1260 days in this 42-month period. Okay, I'm going to jump to Revelation 11, which is going to be what we're going to cover tonight in this 3.5-year period study, which is the focus of this time right here, leading up to the day of the Lord. Revelation 11:2 says, "But leave out the court." See, John was told to measure the temple, but leave out the court, he says, which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the Gentiles, and they will tread the holy city underfoot 42 months. And so John is going to be told that 42 months, which happens to be 3.5 years in months, that the Gentiles are going to tread out Jerusalem, the holy city. So there's a lot going on in Jerusalem. Okay, in this time, the time of the Gentiles, that they're going to tread over the city in this 42 months before their time is up. I have an attachment there. That's where this Luke passage comes in. Luke 4:21-24 does not say anything about 3.5 years, but it does talk about Jesus has just declared in Luke about the abomination of desolation, and Luke here in this Olivet Discourse passage says, "And they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled." And that's the same terminology John uses for this being the time of the Gentiles. Okay, the very next verse in Revelation says this, "And I'll give power to my 2 witnesses." There's 2 people. "They will prophesy 1,260 days. There's the 1,260 days that I'm talking to you about, that John's talking about. "Clothed in sackcloth." Verse 6 will go on to say, "And these 2, these have power to shut heaven so that no rain falls in the days of their prophecy." Well, how long is their prophecy? It says 1,260 days. Their prophecy is 1,260 days, or 3.5 years. They have power over the rain in those days, 3.5 years. Well, look who else happened to have power over the rain 3.5 years. Look at Luke 4:25. "But I tell you, many widows were in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, and there was great famine throughout all that land." So in the days of Elijah, he prophesied and actually apparently spoke to the elements, and there was no rain for 6 months, and it didn't rain again until except at his word. Now, here's a prophet who has power to speak there, and that's exactly what we're going to be looking at tonight. These 2 witnesses in Revelation 11 are going to have the power to shut heaven of rain for the days of their prophecy, which happens to be 3.5 years. Okay. Now, look at James 5:17. It's similar. It says, "Elijah was a man with a nature like yours. He prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain on the land for 3 years and 6 months." It's really a parallel passage to the Luke thing, but he's saying in Elijah's day, there was a 3.5-year period that he prayed for no rain, and it did not rain. Now, if you couple that passage, before we get off it, there are 2 witnesses, and there's a passage in the book of Malachi, the very end passage of the Old Testament, the very last passage. It says this in Malachi 4:4-6. Remember the law of Moses. When you think of Moses, I want you to think of plagues for a minute, and we'll come back to that when we get into Revelation 11. Okay. Remember the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded in Horeb, which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel, with the statutes and judgments. Behold, I'll indeed send you Elijah. When you think of Elijah, think prophecies. Okay? Behold, I'll send you Elijah, the prophet, before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. We're expecting, you could read into it Moses here, but we're expecting an Elijah to come before the great and terrible day of the Lord, somewhere just before he comes. What we're going to cover tonight happens to happen. That very guy, Elijah, can deal with 3.5 years, and he has a parallel prophecy concerning him. We'll come back to that when we get into that. Revelation 12. Again, a 3.5-year passage. The woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared by God that they should feed her there 1,260 days. That's the same time that Jerusalem has to get out of Jerusalem, or the Jews have to get out of Jerusalem. And the Judeans don't go back into Jerusalem and rather flee into the wilderness, and where the wilderness is going to swallow up the flood from that coming from the dragon. Okay? The flood is going to, the earth is going to swallow up so that those who fled are protected. And it's for 1,260 days. There it is right there. Revelation 13:5. He, Antichrist, says this, 13:5. He was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Bang, bang, bang. Keeps saying the same thing, same thing, same thing. Just says it different ways. Revelation 13:5 is the last passage I have. It looks like I have it duplicated on my paper, but that's the last one of the 3.5-year message. What I covered fast there was the references to a 3.5-year period, and they all, except for when Elijah was on the earth and he held back the rain for 3.5 years, they all deal with the end time. But one of the characters in the end time, or not, if not two, the two witnesses, have a parallel 3.5-year period where they speak to the rain, just like Elijah did. They speak, and the earth did not give a rain for 3.5 years until the time that, in the passage we're going to cover yet tonight, until the time that they finish their speaking. All right, Revelation 10, we're there. I'm going to erase some stuff. Now let's just rewrite it if I need to. Okay. Revelation 10 says this, and this is right after after the sixth trumpet has blown, the seventh has not yet blown. The seventh will blow in the middle of chapter 11. But there's preparation going on before the seventh trumpet blows. Revelation 10:1. And I saw still another mighty angel coming down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was on his head. His face was like the sun, and his feet like pillars of fire. He had a little book open in his hand, and he set his right foot on the sea, and his left foot on the land, and cried with a loud voice, as when a lion roars. And when he cried out, 7 thunders uttered their voices. And when the seven thunders uttered their voices, I was about to write, but heard a voice from heaven saying to me, seal up the things which the seven thunders uttered, and do not write them. The angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land raised up his hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that are in it, the earth and the things that are in it, and the sea and the things that are in it, that there should be delay no longer, but in the days of the sounding of the seventh angel, when he's about to sound, the mystery of God will be finished, as he declared to his servants the prophets. Then the voice which I heard from heaven spoke to me again and said, go take the little book which is open in the hand of the angel who stands on the sea and on the earth. And so I went to the angel and said to him, give me the little book. And he said to me, take and eat it, and it will make your stomach bitter, but it will be as sweet as honey in your mouth. Then I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it. It was as sweet as honey in my mouth, but when I had eaten it, my stomach became bitter. And he said to me, you must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. This preparation for the seventh trumpet to blow is a word that John receives, and I want you to consider who he got this word from. It says, still another mighty angel coming down from heaven. Okay? There have been seven angels set aside to blow seven trumpets. 6 of those angels have blown. A 7th one is about to blow, but in context, he's talking about the 7 angels. It says still another angel, so there's this 8th angel, the new angel, the mighty angel. It defines him as still another mighty angel, and if you keep in mind, angel word specifically means messenger. So these first 7, sure, fine messengers, sure, fine angels. Okay? But messenger is the big word there. Coming down from heaven, look how he's clothed. And then you decide who he is. This angel comes from heaven, clothed with a cloud. I don't know how to draw a cloud clothing, but there it is. Okay, that's the clothing. And a rainbow was on his head, so you can see his head. I'm going to have his head coming out of the cloud, all right? And there's a rainbow on his head. His face was like the sun. So I'm going to say he's got a radiance to his face. Didn't go out of the cloud, okay? Radiance to his face. His feet like pillars of fire. I'm going to draw some feet. Excuse my drawing. But they're like fire. He had a little book in his hand, open in his hand. So I'm going to say, apparently you can see his hand. Okay? So let's, I'll just draw, to keep it in context of that day, it could have pages on a book, but it might have scroll. He's got a little book in his hand. I'll make it smaller. Okay? All right. He's got a little book in his hand. And he set his right foot on the sea. All right. His right foot is on the sea. If he's facing us, okay, if he's facing us, his right foot is on the sea. And his left foot on the land. He cried with a loud voice. Whatever he's saying sounds like a lion. Alright? When he cried out, the 7 thunders uttered their voices. He's got authority over these 7 thunders, and I'm going to submit to you that these thunders, who have an utterance, that John starts to write down, I'm going to say they are messengers too, angels. But I'm not sure. I'm just guessing. That's speculation. Just leave it there. But these thunders have voices who have messages. Could very well be the 7 angels who is right in front of him. You know, that here's the 7 angels. But these 7 thunders have 7 voices, and they tell him some things that he's not allowed to say. Don't write that down. Before I go on, what angel, it's a crude drawing, funny drawing, but what angel gives this appearance, especially when we look at rainbow over the head? That's something we saw back in chapter 3 and 4 and 5 of the one who sits on the throne. Look at Ezekiel. I had a friend named Brandon this morning that pointed this out. I want to just call attention to it. This is pretty cool. Ezekiel chapter 1. If I can get there. Ezekiel Daniel. The last 3 verses of chapter 1 say this. Ezekiel seeing a vision. Remember, I don't know if you remember Ezekiel chapter 1, but he sees a vision about the wheel within a wheel. It turns out, if he describes it, and if you were to take the tabernacle, inside the holy place, and blow it up so it's intimidating, so big and so fast and so moving and so alive, that's what Ezekiel sees. It's like he sees what's going on in heaven. Okay, and at the conclusion of what this vision is, he describes the one who is above all this thing that he sees, as if he's seated on in a temple picture, seated above the ark, the mercy seat. And above it says this in verse 26, and above the firmament over their heads was the likeness of a throne, in appearance like sapphire stone. On the likeness of the throne there was a likeness with the appearance of a man high above it. Also from the appearance of his waist and upward I saw, as it were, the color of amber. Okay, from his waist and upward. I'm just going to draw on this drawing because from here and upward is the color of amber. The cloud is not mentioned here. The color of amber with the appearance of fire all around within it. And from the appearance of his waist and downward, I saw, as it were, the appearance of fire with a brightness all around. Fire down the lower end. Like the appearance of a rainbow in a cloud on a rainy day. A rainbow in a cloud on a rainy day. So was the appearance of the brightness all around it. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. So when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard a voice of one speaking. Who's in chapter 11 or chapter 10? Who's the mighty angel? I believe Jesus has come down. Let's consider what he's got in his hand. All right? He's got this little book in his hand. Chapters 4 and 5 describe the Lamb being worthy, the only one worthy to take the scroll, take the book, if you will. Depends on what your version says. It says either book or scroll. He is the only one able to take that book and break open the seals thereof. He's the only one worthy. And here is this son, face of the son person with the rainbow on his head and this book in his hand, and he comes to the earth with this book, and he says to John, here, eat this book. Eat this thing that you couldn't open, but now you can see. Eat this thing. Is it possible that it's the same Lamb who is on the throne that has now come with this book in his hand and say, here, John, take this. This is what the end of this. I remind you what was in that book. There was 6 seals that were on the 7th seal. He is on the 7th seal, having opened the book now. The 7 trumpeters have been the 7th seal in that book, and now that it's opened, one of his messages is, and in the days when the 7th seal, or 7th trumpet sounds, the mystery of God is going to be complete. Jesus is saying that, in my opinion, it's Jesus, is saying this to John and telling him, here's a lot of information that you are not to disclose, and it's to be kept until when? I submit to you, it's going to be kept until the time of the end, when it's going to be revealed what was there. I'm not talking about the time of the very end. I'm talking about, I bet you, prophetic word will be taking place in that time. Understanding what that was. Daniel was told to seal up some things until the time of the end. And then many shall be running to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. But you go your way and go ahead and take your place with your fathers, and I'll raise you at the end time. That's what Daniel 12 says. So, John has a parallel experience combining Ezekiel, this picture of Jesus, combining Daniel, this one who gets a word and says, don't share it until the time of the end. And here's this one at the end of this time of the breaking of the seals saying, here, you've got the picture, take it. I need you to tell prophetically what's about to take place to many nations, peoples, tongues, and kings. Which brings us to chapter 11. And the 7th trumpet hasn't blown yet. I want to erase this and talk about that other thing, the 7th trumpet. In the days, I want to erase it. In the days when the 7th angel shall sound, the 7th trumpet, this is verse 7. In the days of the sounding of the 7th trumpet, when he is about to sound the mystery of God, the mystery of God will be finished. The mystery is finished. At the 7th trumpet, the mystery is finished. What mystery? It goes on to say, the mystery be finished as he declared to his servants, the prophets. The prophets he's referring to, I believe, are certainly the Old Testament prophets, okay? What was their main, if you combine what they talked about the day of the Lord. They talked about resurrection. They talked about conquering death. They talked about bringing peace to his people. They talked about the day of the Lord and the completeness of that package. The mystery and resurrection, probably primarily resurrection. The mystery is going to be finished when the 7th trumpet sounds. The mystery finished. Which brings us to the chapter of the blowing of the 7th trumpet. It goes backwards a little bit in time. Let me read it. Chapter 11, verse 1. Then I was given a reed like a measuring rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, the altar, and those who worship there. Okay, those who worship there in the temple of God normally are priests, okay? But leave out the court, which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it's been given to the Gentiles. Now, what does that mean? It says, take the measurements of the temple itself, but not the external court. The temple itself is where the worshipers worship. Remember, it's abomination of desolation in this period of the end time, but he's saying, and this is right in the middle of the 7th trumpet, this is like end times, okay? This thing's been going on. It says on the wing of the temple, apparently. On the wing, on the outside of the temple, there's this abomination, okay, of desolation. He says, measure the temple. The rest of it has been given to the Gentiles. And they will tread the holy city underfoot for 42 months. Here's your 42 months. The time of the Gentiles. "42 months. And I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days." They'll prophesy 1,260 days, which happens to be the 42 months, okay? Those 2 times look like there's a time of the Gentiles, but a time of the prophetic word being preached. It looks to me like it's in Jerusalem, because they're going to be attacked in Jerusalem in just a second here. The whole thing's centered around Jerusalem. The whole thing's centered around the temple. The Antichrist has set up his place in the temple, in the halfway through the 70th week. He's set up there. This thing, not many Jews are in town. Not many faithful to Jesus Jews, completed Jews. Here are 2. I'm presuming they're somewhere near the temple, but I can't prove it from this. It's just that he was told to measure the temple. But since they're lampstands, they're going to be called lampstands and olive trees. It sounds like they're there. It says, "I will give power to my 2 witnesses," verse 3, "and they will prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands standing before the God of the earth." There's an olive tree and a lampstand reference of the 2 of those in Zechariah 4, if you want to follow that up. "And if anyone wants to harm them, fire proceeds from their mouth and devours their enemies. And if anyone wants to harm them, he must be killed in this manner." In other words, they got some power. Apparently, it could be real fire. It could be the words of their mouth that are powerful words of God, speaking death to those who are resisting the words of God. I don't know. It could be figurative, could be literal. Don't know. In my head, it's figurative, but that's speculation. Okay? I try to, by the way, separate speculation from what it says. Okay? "These have power to shut up heaven so that no rain falls in the days of their prophecy. They have power over waters to turn them to blood and to strike the earth with all plagues as often as they desire." That verse, chapter 11, verse 6. Remember we talked about just about 15 minutes ago about Moses and Elijah. Okay, look at the characteristics that Moses and Elijah, who Malachi talked about in one verse just before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. He talked about Moses. He said Elijah must come, but Moses was in there also. Look at the characteristics of these 2 guys. They have power to shut heaven so that no rain falls in the days of their prophecy. That's 3.5 years, just like Elijah, who is a prophet. "And they have power over waters to turn them to blood." Sounds like Moses and Aaron. "To strike the earth with all plagues." Sounds like Moses. Okay? "As often as they desire." Those prophets are speculation that they might be Moses and Elijah. Some say Enoch and Elijah, since they didn't see death. It's just speculation. Keep in mind, speculation also presumes, just with having them back, it presumes something supernatural that hasn't happened yet. Somebody rising from the dead from eons past, or rising, being rebirthed or something. So keep in mind, it's a speculation. Whoever says this is these guys, at best, it looks like it might be. But there's no way to say that's who they are. At least I haven't found a way to say that's who they are. Matter of fact, Elijah, if you remember, Jesus said, of John the Baptist. This is Elijah who will come. You know, and then he also said Elijah must come before the Son of Man. But he said that concerning John the Baptist, who was not Elijah. He said, this is Elijah who must come. So, since that's not doctrine and solid stuff, I just say that looks like speculation to me, but it doesn't look like it's bad speculation. It just looks like it's speculation. Verse 7. When they, these two witnesses, finish their testimony, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit will make war against them. The beast out of the bottomless pit will make war against them. We have not been introduced to the beast yet in Revelation. But it says here that the beast who will come out of the bottomless pit will make war against these two guys. We're going to find out something about that beast in chapter 13. It says that this beast will make war against them, overcome them, and kill them. Okay, that means that's the end of their 42 months if they're dead. Okay? That's the end of the time of their speaking. In the days of their prophecy, they have done speaking if they're dead. It's the end of the 42 months, the end of this 3.5-year period. Something is about to happen that's pretty special right here. Right here. Just before something happens. 3.5 years have passed. They are dead. Verse 8, and their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city, which is called, spiritually, Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. When they put in the third word, the third description, Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified, there's no question what city we're talking about. Sodom is mentioned because of its great sinfulness. Egypt is mentioned because of the Pharaoh, the hardships of Pharaoh and bonding that. Where also our Lord died, it says, remember, he's been in the city of Jerusalem where the Gentiles are going to trample. He's been measuring the temple. The prophets have been preaching there. The beast who comes out of a pit is going to kill these two guys there. And their bodies, it says, verse 8, having been killed, their bodies will lie in the street of the great city. That great city is Sodom and Egypt, where our Lord also died. They are lying in the streets of Jerusalem. It says, verse 9, then those from the peoples, tribes, tongues, and nations will see their dead bodies 3.5 days, and not allow their dead bodies to be put into graves. This is the victory dance going on. They're celebrating the death of these two believers, these two prophets. The world is. They'll not allow their dead bodies to be put into graves. And yet the whole world's looking at them. How is that possible except in our age? This is the first time it's been able to happen. You remember what it was like in the first Gulf War when you had Charles Jaco and CNN broadcasting live with bombs going off? It was like, this is the first time we're able to really watch war live. That broke open a whole new understanding of what it means when every eye shall see. Because we can see around the world in a moment of what's going on live across the nations, across the oceans. It says those people from those peoples, tribes, tongues, and nations will see their dead bodies 3.5 days and not allow their dead bodies to be put into graves, and those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them, make merry, and send gifts to one another, because these two prophets tormented those who dwell on the earth. Remember, the drought has been going on for a while, 3.5 years. At their word, things have been happening. Could it possibly be that at their word, the stuff that happens in seals 1 through 6 have taken place at their word? How about the 7 trumpets, the things that take place at the 7 trumpets? I'm not saying every seal was at their word. First you have the 4 horsemen and that kind of thing. But what about especially the ends of the trumpets that we've already blasted last week? Remember, it's like calling forth things that are happening, that are troubling them, troubling mankind, troubling the earth. And I want to remind you one other thing, that in the middle of those seals, after 6 seals happened, then you saw 144,000 people sealed, while the Lord said, hold back and don't harm the earth and don't harm the trees and don't harm the lands and the seas until we have sealed the 144,000. In other words, there are believers who are going to be protected from these events that happen in the 5th and 6th seals in particular. But the seals the trumpets 1 through 7 in particular. So, what I'm saying is, these things that even the prophets have called down, did they have effect on Christians? I don't think so. I don't think so. They've been sealed. Okay? Whether you believe in 144,000 literal or sealed the believers, thinking they don't have an effect on them. That's why earth is jealous concerning them and concerning these two focal points of the Jesus movement, where the gospel is going throughout all the earth, and some people are being saved, and so this big polarization is happening. We're going to follow the one who came to lead us, Antichrist, or we're going to follow the one who's coming to get us, Jesus. Verse 9, I'll complete. Those from the peoples, tribes, tongues, and nations will see their dead bodies 3.5 days and not allow their dead bodies to be put into graves. And those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them, make merry, and send gifts to one another, because these 2 prophets tormented those who dwell on the earth. They're getting their just dues according to those who are celebrating their deaths. Now, after 3.5 days, right at the very end, 3.5 days before this 42 months is up, after 3.5 days, the breath of life from God entered them, and they stood on their feet. They are resurrected. They are resurrected, and the whole world is celebrating, looking at their dead bodies, and they're still celebrating. There's the dead bodies, and they're standing up. Oh my goodness. I can see television sets on. I can see broadcasts. I can see breaking news and headlines like what we were celebrating, or what the whole world has been happy about. Oh my goodness. Resurrection. The thing they would fear, and great fear fell on those who saw them. That's verse 11. They stood on their feet. Great fear fell on those who saw them, and they heard a loud voice from heaven saying, come up here. And those 2, ascended to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies saw them. Now, will all believers be seen as they're resurrected? I don't think so. I think it's getting real specific here. I believe the whole earth will watch. Not everyone glued to the TV set. I don't know that. But there certainly are there's a universal news media representation throughout the whole earth, and televisions everywhere, and this is the big story of the time. It's the big story. Those 2 guys died. And the victory is those 2 guys are resurrected as well, and the fear falls on everybody who doesn't know Jesus. And the Jesus knowers know exactly what's taken place. and our time is here. And they heard a loud voice from heaven, verse 12, saying to them, "Come up here." And they ascended to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies saw them. Now read this as if it's one thought. In the same hour there was a great earthquake, and a tenth of the city, Jerusalem, fell. In the earthquake 7,000 people were killed, and the rest were afraid and gave glory to the God of heaven. The second woe is past. The third woe is coming quickly. Then the seventh angel sounded, and there were loud voices in heaven saying a statement. I'll get to that in a minute, because that statement is the conclusive part of what takes place right at this very moment being described. The second woe is past is a reference to the second. Trumpets 4, 5, 6, and 7 were the three woes. After the fifth trumpet, it said the first woe is past. And then after the sixth trumpet ends, before the seventh blows, this is the second woe is past. This sixth trumpet period, it has been leading up to the seventh trumpet. And it says it this way: the second woe is past, because the third woe is about to blow. Then the seventh angel sounded. There were loud voices in heaven saying, I'm going to get to that statement. Look what happens to these two who are lying dead, not in graves. I'm going to put them, I don't know, they're lying dead. World watching them in the streets of Jerusalem. So let's just put them on a street. Okay, there's a street. Okay, and not in the distance. All right. Okay, they're lying dead in the street of Jerusalem. The whole world watching them, and they stand on their feet. They stand on their feet. The whole world is amazed, step by step. They hear a voice from heaven. Come up hither. They hear a voice. That's where we are. Hear a voice. They ascend to heaven in a cloud. In a cloud. Their enemies saw them. The whole world's watching. Does that not sound like a cloud coming of Jesus without even going to what really takes place? What takes place is the words that follow. The seventh angel sounded. There were loud voices in heaven saying, "The kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ." He's about to reign. You understand? It's the time for him to reign. "And he shall reign forever and ever." And the 24 elders who sat before God on their thrones fell on their faces and worshipped God, saying, "We give you thanks, O Lord God Almighty, the one who is and who was and who is to come, because you have taken your great power and reigned. The nations were angry, and your wrath has come," at this seventh trumpet, okay? "And the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that you should reward your servants, the prophets and the saints, and those who fear your name, small and great, and should destroy those who destroy the earth." Then the temple of God in heaven was opened. No more in the godly temple in heaven, no more curtains, no more holy of holies not exposed. The temple of God in heaven was opened. And the ark of the covenant, which is in the holy of holies, was seen in his temple. And there were lightnings, noises, thunderings, and earthquake, and great hail. We're allowed in. We're allowed in picture form. We can see, just like when when the veil was rent in two when Jesus died, and he paid our debt. That was the earthly veil. This one's the heavenly veil. The heavenly door opened, swing open. That is Jesus coming in chapter 11. And we're not even to chapter 19 yet. Is he going to come again in 19? Or is this a first picture of his coming? Having already been mentioned, if you remember back in verse, I believe it's 1:8, Revelation 1:8. Behold, he comes with clouds, and every eye shall see him. They also which pierced him, I believe it says. Well, here he's coming in chapter 11. He's been coming 2 or 3 times more in Revelation. Now, I'm going to leave that there. Here's this one that came in a cloud in chapter 10. But the declaration was, in that day when he comes, when the seventh trumpet blows, the mystery that he's spoken to his prophets will be completed. This is what happens at the seventh trumpet to these two guys. Look at 1 Corinthians 15 and we'll close. This is the first time we've really gotten in depth to 1 Corinthians 15, but I'm going to finish right there and call it the evening. I want to tell you there are 2 and only 2 clear rapture passages that are very extremely clear. These are evident ones. 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 17. It said about those, I don't want you to be sorrowful concerning those who are asleep, because those who are asleep will come out of the tomb when Jesus comes with his saints. How does it say it? I want to say it right because I tend to quote these 2 passages interchangeably, and it doesn't exactly say that. I don't want you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you sorrow as others who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who sleep, the dead, in Jesus. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord, that's the rapture part that I'm talking about, will not precede those who are asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, voice. Okay, you catching this picture? He's descending from heaven with a shout. The voice of an archangel, the trumpet of God. They heard the 7th trumpet of God. I'm going to blast this trumpet down. The angel blowing the trumpet. Okay, there's the trumpet. The blast. The voice. The Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and thus we shall always be with the Lord. That's one rapture passage. And it's just like Matthew's Olivet Discourse. Clouds, angels, trumpet, gathering his elect. There is no question that Philippians, or the 1 Thessalonians passage, is exactly identical to the second coming in power and glory that I'm saying. That's because it is the one. It's not a secret coming before down here. The rapture of the church is this one. Now let's deal with the other rapture passage for the first time. 1 Corinthians 15, 51. Says this, behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the what trump? What trump? The last one. The last one means the last of a series of trumpets. The last one is the 7th trumpet, where these guys are raised, where it's the end of the 1260 days, where it's the time when Jesus comes again in power and glory. Where it's the end of a 3.5-year period of tribulation. Where it's the end, that's when 1 Corinthians 15 is. At the last trump. At the last. I love it. It's at the last trump. There is no room for that to be any different than the second coming in power and glory. No room. Where else are you going to put it? Especially with the overwhelming evidence that you've got in Matthew saying it's immediately after the tribulation. Okay, for the trumpet will sound, at the last trumpet, verse 52, for the trumpet will sound and the dead will be raised incorruptible. When is the first resurrection? The first resurrection of the believers? At the last trumpet. Revelation 20 is going to talk about the first resurrection. It's happening at the seventh trumpet. When I tell you Jesus comes in chapter 11, he is coming in chapter 19 and 20. And that's when the first resurrection is, but he's also the first resurrection here in chapter 11. It's the first resurrection. This thing that we're told by others that say, okay, yeah, this is just a preliminary resurrection. It's the very same one. It's evident in the passage. For this corruptible must put on incorruption. The trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we, who are alive, shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. And so when this corruptible has put on incorruption, and this mortal has put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your sting? O Hades, where is your victory? The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. I want to tell you, this is one of my favorite chapters in the Bible is Revelation 11. Because it puts it all together. When I began to see Revelation being the completion of Revelation 11 in particular, being the completion of 1 Corinthians 15, I'm thinking, wow, this is a terrific thing. Look at chapter 10, and I'm done. Chapter 10 we already looked at. Remember this last thing that I didn't say? It said, in the days when the seventh trumpet sound, when the angel begins to sound the seventh trumpet, the mystery should be finished. 1 Corinthians 15. Beloved, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. 1 Corinthians 15 is pointing to a mystery. I'm thinking the mystery is bigger than just those, this mystery that's resolved is bigger than just those who are here not having died and being raised. This is the mystery spoken of by the prophets, which somehow God combines the living and the dead to a resurrected body. This mystery by the prophets is this part. Paul saying, I'm showing you some more mystery. We who are alive are going to be changed at the same time. That's the day of the Lord. See you next week.
What do you think is the voice of the archangel? 1 Thessalonians 4:16. With a shout, with the voice of the archangel, the trump of God.
I don't have any problem with it being a trumpet voice. Trumpets being figurative, but trumpets would fit a picture of Jericho falling. Remember they walking around Jericho 7 times on the 7th day, and so that, when they blew their trumpets the seventh day, having walked around 7 times, all of that picture of Jericho that we have thought, most of our symbolism has dealt with the redemption of Rahab as a picture of the church and the scarlet rope thrown over the side, but the ultimate redemption of Rahab is at the people of God marching around Jericho and the trumpet picture. So if you're asking, what is that trumpet? I haven't seen that it's perfectly clear in Scripture what the difference between the voice and the trumpet. First Thessalonians talks about a voice. Matthew talks about angels and trumpets. It doesn't have the voice. Where First Thessalonians has both the voice and the trumpet. And where we just looked at Revelation, it has the voice and the trumpet. I think that's about as far as it goes, at least to my knowledge, about, is there a literal trumpet? I want to think yes. But if it's a voice and a trumpet, that's a voice that sounds like a trumpet, because there's other references of the voices as a trumpet, but not necessarily in reference to this 7th trumpet, but there is that comparison in other scriptures that puts the two together, voice and trumpet being the same thing. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Kind of. Well, I was just looking at the reconciling chapter 10 and it being, chapter 10 Revelation as it being, that is Jesus Christ and not an angel.
Okay, I don't think Jesus is the 7th angel. I believe it's because it opens him up as, and I saw still another angel. I don't think he's talking about the 7th angel with the 7th trumpet. I think he's talking about here's the 7.
The mighty
angel is Jesus, separate from the 7.
Right.
So
that's what I was looking at today, whether that is an angel, like a mighty angel as in like Gabriel or Michael or something like that, or is that Christ?
Mm-hmm.
Looking at angel descriptions, because it does say, and he swears by himself.
Mm-hmm.
And,
right. Yeah.
Just looking to reconcile that.
And this angel in 10th chapter is swearing by him who reigns on his throne. I mean, I think he's saying, I am the one. Because anybody else that swears by him, it's like, it's an abomination type thing. Well, this angel is swearing by him who has the throne. He also has the book in his hand, very likely the scroll of whom he is only worthy to open. I'm thinking very likely the scroll. And I suppose that's speculation too. You just got to go decide what book is it that he has in his hand. He just happens to have a rainbow on his head at the same time, okay, coming in a cloud, matching the glory of God in Ezekiel, okay. So I'm thinking, for me, there's no question who it is, but you almost have to arrive at that on your own, having studied it yourself. You don't want to take it from me, you want to go get it. Any more questions?
I'm good.
You're good.
The 7 thunders, the thought crossed my mind that could be the 7 spirits of God.
Could be. Mm-hmm.
So whatever they had to say, and then that, I wonder, he told him not to write it down, but I wonder if he ever told anybody what they said. He didn't say, don't tell anybody. He just said, don't write it down.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be hard to keep that to yourself the rest of your life. And not at least tell some of the other apostles.
Mm-hmm.
So, I know it would only be lore or whatever, but I wonder if there is any, 1st, 2nd century writings that allude to what may have been said at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But just, that may seven thunders, that goes along with the seven eyes, looking to and fro. So that might be the seven spirits of God, wherever they were. And then we talk about Elijah, excuse me. I looked it up, and one of them that I looked at, the first one I looked at, which was the second one down, said the name Elijah means "my God is Yahweh." Well, the other ones were a little more. One said, "the Lord is my God," and that website even took the O out of God for it, put G dash D. I guess, I don't know, they were trying to be politically correct, or I don't know what that was all about.
I think
But
it's an English way of saying we can't pronounce his name.
No, but it was one of those baby name sites. The other one was more of a, but anyway,
Gotcha.
no, they said the Lord is my God, and they put G dash D. They didn't put the O for what, I don't understand why in that baby. But anyway, that's how saying Elijah is coming, John is an Elijah, John is a person who the Almighty is his God. Okay? So it could be almost just a description.
Okay.
Not necessarily a name, but a word that means John's coming and the Almighty is his God.
Okay.
But there is thoughts to think about. And then the mystery finished. Okay. Well, did you read the preface to that book that I gave you?
No.
Okay. He
That
said,
one?
do you have it with you? Are you going to look at it at all, or are you just okay? Let's see what understanding the deception. Where? Because he quotes a scripture here. Hopefully, I can find it. If I don't find it quickly here, we can go. Yes, Ezekiel 7:22, and he says in here, in order to and it's not the preface; it's the first chapter. In order to understand how effective the deception of the lying pen of the scribes can be, let us consider Ezekiel 7:22. My face will turn also from them, and they shall pollute my secret place, for the robbers shall enter into it and defile it. And he goes on here to say, examining this text as it reads in most Bibles, we find the word place is in italics. Most people are unaware that it does not appear in the original text and are unsuspectingly coerced to follow the translator's leading that this is talking about a place. What I'm getting at is you take the word place out and it says the lying pen of the scribes will pollute his secret. Okay? So that's all in different places he says it's a mystery, it's a secret. And that just, I thought of this verse in that the mystery is another word for secret. You know, they're not exactly interchangeable, but the secret is a mystery.
Right.
So I don't even know what I'm saying, except it was interesting to me that at the seventh trumpet, the secret, the mystery is completed. Okay.
And get specific about it too. The mystery as he is declared to his prophets, which to me is the day of the Lord. This day of the Lord is finished. It's completed.
And what this guy is saying is the lying pen of the different scribes that have tweaked Scripture over the years have masked so many parts of the secret that it makes it. And he makes a really good analogy in here that okay, if you've got a 10,000 piece puzzle, which that's what Scripture is a 10,000 piece puzzle, he said, if you take the cover off of it so they can't see the picture of what it's supposed to look like,
Mm-hmm.
well, all of a sudden, you're at a big disadvantage trying to put the puzzle together.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take a few of the pieces out and throw them away and throw just a few pieces in there that weren't even from the original puzzle,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to put it together and you don't know what it looks like.
That's good.
So, I just thought, fun, I guess.
Good.
I'm not sure I actually said anything. It was a bunch of words strung together, but.
Good thought.
Oh, another thing I thought, the two witnesses, you know, a lot of people think of Moses because of the plagues,
Mm-hmm.
and what's the other thing? Plagues and turning the river to blood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When it was Aaron that turned the river to blood.
Yep.
And I just had to re-look that back up.
Right.
Exodus 9, Moses extends his arms for the plagues to come.
Mm-hmm.
And Aaron's the one that dips his rod
Mm-hmm.
for the, so, can't take that
How about
fact.
the two rods? Wasn't there, did Moses have a rod?
Moses
and
had a
Aaron
staff
rod,
and
so there was
he has a
two,
rod.
but Aaron's rod got in the ark, right?
But it did.
But it. Are we still on camera? Are we?
We are.
Okay.
Or we can trim it down, whatever.
Uh-huh.
But, where you said, where was it, when, you know, at the final thing, and one thing that they described, they saw the ark. You know, at the very end, in heaven, they see
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the ark. You know, out of everything they could be describing, there it is.
Yeah.
As
Right.
in,
Or it was seen. It might have been seen not just by them. You're talking about the two, or the two
What
seen?
script?
I'm seeing I'm thinking
what
it
scripture
was
was
when
it?
they came. This is Revelation 11. When they came, it said. Actually, they leave off those two after they're resurrected. They're resurrected in a cloud. Then the seventh angel sounds. You don't see them anymore. Seventh angel sounds. Then there were loud voices in heaven saying, "The kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord." Then it declares. The last verse is actually when the temple of God was opened in heaven, and the ark of His covenant was seen in His temple.
That's where it is. Yeah.
The last verse of
Chapter
11.
verse 19, chapter 11.
So did you look up any of these New Testament scriptures in that Aramaic New Testament?
Not for this study tonight. Didn't.
No, so,
Haven't been able to crack it yet, actually.
yeah, the temple of God was open in heaven. So, before that is closed?
Before what?
Before that is closed? At this point it's open? So you have to assume that before that
Not seen. I think it's somehow visible or evident from the temple of God was opened in heaven. The ark of His covenant was seen in His temple. I'm thinking that's in heaven.
And it's interesting is you look at, you know, Revelation before, you know, 1 through 11, it mentions the altar of labor, you know, all the different articles, but doesn't mention the ark until right there.
Maybe that's the Holy of Holies part.
And it's not opened
The altar
until
is
this point here.
The altar is in front of at least in the tabernacle it is. I think Hebrews, there's some controversy where it is in
You know, like it moves in and out type
maybe something
deal.
like that. There's some controversy.
But still, it mentions everything at this point, and it's like the ark was sealed up,
Mm-hmm.
couldn't be seen until this point.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Right.
open up where, like on the earth, you know, the veil was rent. You can go freely into the Holy of Holies where the ark was.
Mm-hmm.
So the pattern wasn't the same there to there, because apparently it's still sealed up there.
At a big victory, temple's open. In both cases.
Yeah.
He died for us.
Yeah.
Made a way.
I just found that pretty interesting. You know, it's one of them things.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. I think I'm done.
Cool.
Did I ever ask you what you thought, you know, when the two witnesses are resurrected? about, possibility at that very moment, it's the same time that all the dead are resurrected as well? Looking at it on a timeline,
That's what I believe has happened.
you believe
I believe they.
at the same time the two witnesses, all
I
the other
believe-
dead?
I believe it's all part of the same resurrection. I believe it's one resurrection.
Cool.
And that's how I believe every eye sees them. It's not that everybody sees everybody, but they see Jesus coming. I'm thinking the cameras got backed off and say, look at him, oh my gosh. End,
Yeah.
the end, of our days, and it's, oh my goodness, too late, at this point. All of rebellion has been stupidity, has been foolishness. All of our rebellion has been. I think that's how it becomes a woe. It doesn't really say the third woe, but it's evident that this is the great drastic big one.
Another thing I noticed tonight is the earthquake in 11, and they cry out to God. And then chapter 16, earthquake in hell, and they blaspheme God. One's a great earthquake, the other one's just an earthquake. One's worse than the earth has ever seen. The other one's just an earthquake. One they cry out to God, the other one they blaspheme God. It says they blaspheme because of the hail. At this point they're not. It's just like two different main occurrences, but it seems like it could be the same.
Right.
It's kind of hard to wrap my mind around that. But I think they're the same. But then they've got different describers.
About that book, when he ate, it was sweet and yet bitter. Sweet to his taste, but bitter in his stomach. There's that part too, that John is a believer. John is an apostle. John receives the word, but then realizes, receives this book, but then realizes I think there'll be a parallel, oh my goodness, I should have done a little bit more at the same time you're saved. Oh, thank you, Jesus, for coming. Oh my goodness, you're leaving behind some that we could have done more. And I think it would be absolutely sweet, and yet.
Yeah. I looked up a lot of that today, this morning, we talked about the sweet and bitter at Bible study this morning. And there's a lot of verses that say how the Word of God is sweet on our lips. It's in Psalms, it's in Ezekiel, it's in Daniel. There's tons of verses, but none say about the bitterness afterwards. But a lot of sweetness was pretty, which goes right along with it.
Right.
So I'm sure it's a topic for 8 or 10 weeks from now, but all this takes place. There's the resurrection, the two witnesses are resurrected and everyone else is. If that is the end and it is too late for everyone, how does the earth get populated during the 1,000 years? And he actually ends up, the dragon comes back and deceives people once again. Does that mean that there is a group of people that somehow lived through the tribulation and they're not killed at that time, so they're not taken to judgment, and they populate the earth, and that group of people has the opportunity to actually live under Messiah as king? And in Isaiah it says every Sabbath to every new moon people will come from all around the world to keep the feast and worship him in Jerusalem. But then at the end of all that, still the dragon comes back and he's released at the end of the 1,000 years, and he deceives many once again.
So I believe.
So who are those people who populate the earth to make all these people?
In a nutshell, I can give you what I think, but I'm thinking that at his coming, he doesn't deal with all the nations even yet. I believe the day of the Lord is 1,000 years, highlighted by the day he comes, and there's a resurrection, and the end day of the day of the Lord when he's seated on his throne, and there's a second resurrection, and the day of the Lord is in between, you know, and it's the day and the day and the day, you know, so that when he comes the first time.
So you're saying there's a group of people that will live through that whole mess,
Yeah.
still be on earth, and they and their children or offspring or whatever will have the opportunity to actually live right under Messiah as King.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of look at it as there's India, Arabia, you know, whatever. There's Russia up here, Africa. Okay. It looks to me like the nations that are gathering, at least if I'm interpreting it right now, the nations that are gathered against Israel are all centered right in here. But there is some coming from way off, and, you know, whatever. And I'm thinking that's who the Lord deals with, those that reject him there. Not so much.
So he deals with those who are encompassing Jerusalem and the people who have already died.
And many of those die. Okay? Think about this, that even tonight's passage had, in this same hour, a great earthquake in the city of Jerusalem, and 7,000 were killed. Well, what significance is that? Because he's coming, and if he deals with all the unrighteous dead at this particular time, so they died an hour early. You know? Here's 7,000 people that die in Jerusalem, and does he kill everybody? I mean, did they all turn on themselves? I believe the armies turn on themselves just like Gideon's army and all that kind of stuff. I believe that all takes place right here while he's standing on the Mount of Olives and shows up. And I think there's a whole lot of stuff, but I think he's also dealing with the nations. This nation, that nation, that nation, and that nation, and that nation. I think when he comes, there's been a supernatural something, and he's sitting here, and I'm thinking, godly nation is saying, yes, Lord, you know. But that doesn't mean they turn to him. And I don't know what salvation is going to be like in that 1,000 years, because we see Jesus. This is all speculation.
Right.
But it seems like that they may have to be see, even hard for me to say this because I'm Baptist, saved by works. Okay? You know what I mean? They have to be right. They're seeing truth. It's no longer faith. It's like, who am I? I got to keep God's commandments.
Yeah.
You know, it's not as if I've been forgiven. I've got to do this, and it's the right thing to do. And I'm going to be honest.
So it's hard for me to believe that anybody can be saved during that time, because you missed out on your faith. That's salvation opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
but there'll be children that'll be born that didn't have the opportunity to believe in faith.
Now think about
I mean, you supposedly will. I mean, yeah, because it says someone who dies at 100 years will be thought to be a baby.
Mm-hmm. Think about how they're judged at the whoever's not written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Okay, if your name's in there, you're good. But they're judged by the works. What if they're able to, having seen Jesus and knowing the right thing, saying, living the life that is running toward him, choosing not to do wrong, loving him with all your heart, going up to the feast, or whatever, you know, I mean, just whatever it is that looks like him, and they choose that because it's the right thing to do. I'm following my God.
And that's,
I don't know.
Isaiah 66 is the chapter I'm referencing there, but
Mm-hmm.
it's almost as if there will be mortals and immortals living on the earth at
Yes,
the same time.
Absolutely.
Because we're supposed to be there
Right.
ruling over a city or a county or
Who we ruling over if they're
a
all in
shed
one?
or what, you know, depending on what we did or didn't do.
Right.
Uh, So,
But they could just all be blinded, just like majority of them were when he was on earth. you
well,
know.
many of them will at the end of the 1,000 years, because
Yeah,
the dragon's
kick up-
released from the
kick
pit
up one last
again, he
rebellion.
comes back, and he deceives the nations once again.
And that time, they're not destroyed with his coming, they're destroyed by fire. Fire of God falls from heaven and they're destroyed. And
And
that's
it's
like a
not-
one-sentence statement, but there it is.
And it's not until after that that the New Jerusalem actually then arrives.
And actually, when they're destroyed by fire, I believe, you know, they're resurrected to face the judgment. You know, and then comes new heaven, new earth. Well, I'm tired of standing in front of this camera, if we can turn it off.
Alright, fair enough.
Thanks.
101 minutes.